Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Marisol Nichols Podcast. I'm going to read an excerpt from the book called Takedown by Laila Mickelwait. This is a phenomenal book. So just to give you an idea of what we're in for this episode. In 2020, Pornhub was the 10th most visited website in the world. It was also the largest and most popular porn site with, get this, 130 million visits per day. That's 47 billion visits per year and enough videos uploaded every 12 months that it would take 169 years if you watch them back to back. Pornhub was the world's YouTube of free user-generated porn with more site traffic than Amazon, Yahoo, and Netflix, and more daily visits than the entire populations of Canada, Australia, and France combined. Its 4.6 billion daily advertising impressions were helping the site rake in hundreds of millions of dollars each year for its parent company, MindGeek. In 2020, researchers named Pornhub the third most influential tech company, quote unquote, on global society, just behind Google and Facebook. With billboards in Times Square, faux commercials on Saturday Night Live, and multi-million-dollar PR campaigns, Pornhub was a cultural icon. It was also an unchallenged crime scene. And the person who is my guest today is Laila Mickelwait, the author of Takedown.
This might be the biggest scandal you haven't heard about.
The largest porn website,
attracting 130 million users a day, more than Netflix or Amazon.
Pornhub is under investigation.
This was a company that did whatever it wanted until one woman and a laptop exposed the truth.
She is the founder of the Justice Defense Fund.
One of the pioneers in anti-trafficking.
Laila Mickelwait.
Thank you for having me. I was reading the story of a missing 15-year-old girl who was found when somebody tipped off her mother that she was in 58 videos on Pornhub being raped and abused. The Sunday Times did an investigation. They found dozens of illegal videos, even children as young as 3 years old. How was this happening? I decided to test this upload system. In under 10 minutes, with only an email address, I was able to upload content that went live on the site. They weren't asking for an ID. They weren't asking for a consent form to make sure that this wasn't a rape or trafficking victim. The site became infested with videos of real sexual crime. I have to sound the alarm on this. I was posting on Twitter, started a petition. We're just about to hit 1 million.
2 million signatures.
Hundreds of organizations participating. Media started to pay attention.
In your article, you write, with Pornhub, we have Jeffrey Epstein times 1,000.
This isn't about porn. This is about rape and sexual abuse of children.
The 12-year-old boy, he was drugged, overpowered, and raped in 23 videos being sold on Pornhub.
Victims were speaking out left and right.
This is going to haunt me for the rest of my life.
Whistleblowers were saying this is true.
Pornhub put profits over people.
Even the former owner of Pornhub reached out saying he wanted to help. Dozens of lawsuits were filed. We went after Visa and MasterCard to cut ties, but they were still resistant. Pornhub started attacking myself, victims. They don't want to stop because they're making a lot of money. And they fight dirty. Pornhub was so scared, they deleted 80% of their site. 10 million videos gone. Victims, they were so happy and relieved because for the first time in years, their rape videos were off of Pornhub. But the fight's not over. They are going to answer for what they've done.
Please welcome to the show, Laila Mickelwait.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be with you again.
I'm so glad you're back. First of all, this book, everyone at the audiences, if you're listening, it's called Takedown by Laila Mickelwait. It is so good. It's so well written. It plays out like a Netflix movie completely, and it's a very, very vitally important read, ladies and gentlemen. So if you can, run as soon as you're done listening to this and go get Takedown. So, Laila, how is everything? How's everything going since you published the book?
It's going. I'm very pleased. I had high hopes that this would get out to as many people as possible because, the goal of the book is that we want more people to get activated into the fight, to read this, to get inspired, to get educated. And not just this fight, but the larger fight against child sex trafficking and online sexual abuse. And we've done great. In the week after it was released, we hit 2 national bestseller lists, the AP bestseller list and USA Today. So we were so glad about that. And the most important reactions to me have been from survivors who have been reading the book and just feeling a sense of hope that, this truth is now on the public record, and people in power who read this are under an obligation to take action. And that there's this sense of palpable hope that this book can hopefully move things forward in this fight and help produce closure and justice.
What you've accomplished already in having Pornhub have to take down content, according to the Financial Times, it was the biggest takedown of content in internet history. Now, for those of you that are just, joining us and maybe didn't turn into the first podcast, can you sort of walk us through how you discovered what I think is the biggest criminal cover-up in probably the history of the history? Can you walk us through that just a little bit so that our audience is like, wait, what? Possibly hearing this for the first time.
Absolutely. And to set the stage, I think it's good for us to understand, who is Pornhub and how big they are and what we're dealing with here and why, what's happened so far and what we want to happen is such an important fight. So Pornhub, at the time that this story started in February of 2020, was the 10th most trafficked website in the world. So the 10th largest website in the world. And they were knowingly profiting from countless videos of child sexual abuse, rape, and trafficking. So this is all set in the context of my own advocacy career, where at that time it was about 15 years that I had been fighting this battle against sex trafficking and child sexual abuse and adult trafficking as well. And I had seen that there was this change a few years prior, with the emergence of the internet, and we live in a digital world where there was this intersection between the big porn industry and sex trafficking. And I say big porn because there's a big porn industry, just like there's big tobacco and there's big pharma. And the big porn industry, I understood, was dominated by a very few number of companies, the biggest being MindGeek. And MindGeek is the parent company of Pornhub. And they had a virtual monopoly on the industry, owning most of the world's most popular porn sites and brands. And so my antennas were up at this time. I was already investigating this. I was researching. And I came across a story in late 2019 that really struck me, that really shocked me. And it was the story of a 15-year-old girl from Broward County, Florida. And she had been missing for an entire year, and she was finally found when her mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he had recognized her daughter on the site, and she was found in 58 videos being raped and trafficked for profit. And his face was matched to 7-Eleven footage from a convenience store security camera, and she was rescued from his apartment. But that wasn't the only headline that was bothering me at the time. I had read an investigation by the Sunday Times in London, and they found dozens of videos of underage children on the site within minutes, even including children as young as 3 years old. And there was a case at the same time of a woman named Nicole Adamando, that she was the mother of 2 young children. Just like me, I'm a mother of 2 young children. And she had been tortured. She had been assaulted by this man, and she had actually killed him in defense. And she was facing life in prison at the time. And he had uploaded those videos to Pornhub. So I was reading these stories in the news, and I was up late one night rocking my inconsolable baby who had had a birth complication. And I was thinking about these stories, and a question came to mind. And I just said, how in the world did this happen? How did these videos get uploaded to the site? And I had an idea. I said, I'm going to test the upload system for myself and see what it takes. And that's when I discovered what millions of people actually already knew. And that is all it took to upload was an email address. And I began down this kind of suddenly getting swept up into this movement, really, because I felt like I have to sound the alarm on this. And I realized that Pornhub wasn't a porn site, it was a crime scene. And that's how it all started. That's how the trafficking hub movement started, was that night, making that discovery.
And just for people who maybe are not on Pornhub, like you don't need, for the audience, you don't need an ID, you don't need anything. Like Laila was explaining, you just need an email address. So when she mentions, crime scene, and she mentions underage minors, and she mentions rapes, this is actual rapes. This is user generated people, rapists, child abusers, videoing their victims, uploading it to Pornhub, and then Pornhub distributing it all over the place for profit, putting advertising.
With the download button. Mm-hmm. Yes, with the download button and monetizing it with ads. So, this is all free porn, but it's not free. It's highly monetized. It exists to make hundreds of millions of dollars per year for Pornhub's parent company. And at the time, all it took was an email address. Today, after all of what's happened over the last years since this began, they have been forced into making some changes. They still have a site awash with unverified videos where the individuals in them have not been verified for age or consent. And because of that, the site is still a crime scene even today. But that is exactly what was happening. And these are not actors and actresses. I know what they try to, present this facade to the world that, this is all pretend, that this is all legal and consensual adults who may appear to be children, may appear to be in distress, but don't worry, it's all pretend. That wasn't true. Pretend rape was side by side with real rape. The abuse of a 16-year-old acting it out in porn was side by side with the real abuse of a 16-year-old who was being raped. And that was the state of the site at the time. And it was infested with these videos of real sexual crime. And it was all hidden in plain sight, which was kind of a crazy thing because it's not some obscure website on the dark web where it's a few people who may be seeing this and it was all hidden from the public. This was literally in plain sight where 5 million users an hour were on that site. And so it was just crazy. But it took, this moment. I love the phrase, an idea whose time had come. And I think Trafficking Hub was an idea whose time had come. It was time. They had been getting away with this since 2007 when the site was launched, destroying and shattering the lives of countless victims around the world with impunity. And it was time for them to finally be exposed.
100%. And so the audience understands, these are videos, there's no mistaking that this is an actual victim versus an actor. When you've got a teenager crying, begging for help, duct taped, tied up, tears pouring down their face. This is actual videos and footage of actual rapes, of actual
and they're homemade
abuse.
Videos. So, this is the YouTube of porn. These are not professionally produced videos where you have actors who are pretending this is happening. No, these are shaky, grainy, homemade, clearly homemade videos with people in them who are not acting, again, real tears begging to stop. The commenters in the video, so there was 12 million commenters or comments on Pornhub a year. And so many of them were recognizing what was going on in the videos. They would say, this is rape. This is effing child pornography. And what Pornhub would do was they would censor the words rape, child, underage, but they would leave the videos untouched on the site for months and years, earning revenue for their company. And that is exactly what was going on.
And in her book, Takedown, you actually see she has screenshots that she put into the book of the censoring of the words and how they would leave R*******. P-E. That's what they would censor, not the video.
Yeah.
All of these people are commenting.
They would just censor the word that flagged the crime and leave the crime untouched on the site. And they did this as they set the system up to do this. However, I learned, and you'll learn this as you go through the book and have these conversations with MindGeek employees and insiders and moderators. And they told me, well, they had set up the system to flag spam comments and then disable those accounts and take those down. But no, not for the illegal words that would flag these actual crimes. They would leave them untouched on the site. And that was one of so many different things that they did that it was kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion as we, together in this story, in this book, you go with me on a journey of discovery, of understanding the deep, deep complicity of Pornhub and its owners in the global distribution and monetization of sexual crime, and the way that they knew what was going on, that they had intentionally put in place policies to allow it to happen. I mean, one example is the fact that we uncovered through all of this, and that includes the lawsuit legal discovery on behalf of victims, and we can talk about that later, but that they had 1,800 employees at the time. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they had employed one single person, 5 days a week to review videos that were flagged by users for terms of service violations, including child abuse, rape, and trafficking. And they had a backlog of 706,000 flagged videos. They had a policy where they wouldn't even put a video in queue for review unless it had over 15 flags. That means a child victim could flag their video 15 times and it wouldn't even be put in line for review. That was the kind of thing that they were doing. And there's dozens of examples of things like that.
And to be clear, and I already know the answer of this, but the audience won't, did they possibly take down the videos while they were being reviewed? No,
they did not do that. No, they were left untouched on the site. Another thing is I had a moderator from Cyprus that, for so long since it started, I just said, I really want to hear directly from these. They weren't even called the moderators. They called them referral source review agents, something very obscure to kind of obscure the title. But I wanted to talk to one of these reviewers, and I got the opportunity. And there's a whole chapter in the book that's verbatim dialogue that I had preserved between myself and the moderator. What I knew from the outset is that I needed to do meticulous documentation. So, you had mentioned it kind of reads like you're going through scenes, and you are going through scenes, but they're 100% real. There's nothing fabricated about it. The dialogue was documented verbatim as it was happening, either when it was happening online or other ways. And this moderator told me they had 30 moderators working in Cyprus only for all of MindGeek's tube sites. So that would include Pornhub, yes, but YouPorn, TubeBait, XTube, GayTube, ExtremeTube, all the most popular tube sites in the world. They were working 10 per shift, 8-hour shift. They were watching up to 2,000, skipping through up to 2,000 videos per shift. Right. So, I mean, this was just insane. But the way that the information came about is you uncover it with me. And my hope is when the reader gets to the end of this, not only do you meet whistleblowers and hear all about this, the practices that they employed to keep illegal content on the site, but you meet victims. You get to hear right directly from victims as they describe what it was like to experience the immortalization of their rape and trauma on the site and the struggle for them to try to get these videos down unsuccessfully. And my hope is that the reader at the end of this is as angry about this as I am, that they're as impassioned about it as I am, and that they want to, in whatever way they can, join the fight against this kind of abuse.
And they do, and people will, because you can't read this and not be furious and heartbroken for the victims of Pornhub. And I wanted to actually jump to that real quick because, people might get the wrong idea that, like in other words, I'm going to phrase this, I already know the answer, but did victims reach out to Pornhub when they would see their own rape videos online, and how was that handled?
That was another highly disturbing part of all of this. is that victims said again and again and again, and they provided email. I mean, I saw begging emails that these victims sent to Pornhub over and over. They would reach out to get those videos down, and they were discouraged. They were kind of thwarted. They were challenged. Prove to us, show us your ID. Show me and prove that you're a victim. Prove that you're underage. But there was no proof. There was no ID to get that video uploaded to Pornhub in the first place. That's only if they were, getting an answer. And many times they would get no answer at all. And so they would just give up. And even when they did get the videos down, they would just be re-uploaded again and again and again, and getting millions and more millions of views. And many of these victims just said, at some point, I just had to give up because it was just, I was never going to win. Because this was kind of a sadistic game of whack-a-mole where they just had to be searching for their worst moments of their lives again and again, trying to get them down. And for the underage victims, I mean, Serena is a featured victim in the story. Courageous, beautiful woman of just, I'm so in so much admiration for what she's done and the way that she's spoken up, because the book wouldn't exist without her. She courageously spoke to Nick Kristof of the New York Times, and he featured her story along with many other victims in a groundbreaking article that without his piece in the New York Times, this book literally would not exist. But, she was a 14-year-old, innocent 14-year-old. She had never kissed a boy before. She was a straight A student, and she had a crush on a boy a year older than her, who convinced her to send him some nude images and videos, which is, today, in today's digital world, this is like it or not, this is reality. This is what so many kids are doing these days. So she did. And then he shared it with his classmates, and his classmates uploaded it to Pornhub. It started to get millions of views. She would get it down. It would go back up again. She went on a spiral of depression and despair. She had to drop out of school because of the shame. She was bullied in school. She ended up self-medicating by getting addicted to drugs. She ended up homeless, living out of her car. And Serena could be anyone's daughter. Oh. And that really struck me when I met her and met many other victims like her, is that it's not just someone that's, out in a foreign country that gets kidnapped and locked up and abused like we might see in the movies, but literally could be anybody's daughter. It could have been my daughter. And so that is just like kind of a striking aspect of the victims' stories that you read in the book as well.
It's that article with Nick Kristof was groundbreaking. I remember when it came out and I was like, oh my God, somebody's doing something about this. Because it's sort of been this, at least in the anti-trafficking movement, like everyone sort of knew, right? Like it was whispered about and everyone kind of knew, yes, there's trafficking victims on Pornhub, but there wasn't a movement to do something about it really until that article really in a giant way. And, what I love so much about how this whole thing started with you particularly is the story that you go into in the book of just putting just data, just information on Twitter. This is like, you have to understand to the audience, Laila didn't have, 1 million followers on Twitter when she started this. Like, just here you go, guys. Like, here's Twitter. I'm just going to put this out into the universe. And then people would hear this and hear this data and hear this information and start sharing, hey, did you look at this? Did you look at this? Did you see in this? And sharing and joining you in this fight. Mm-hmm. And that's how whistleblowers came to you and other people. And it gives me so much hope, because when you hear the stories of hundreds, maybe thousands of men around the world downloading and watching a girl's rape, it breaks my faith in humanity. And then when I hear all the people that have come on board to help you and join the fight and share this, that at least gives me back my hope that people do care.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I feel you. at the beginning of this fight, I was probably at a low point as far as discouragement and disillusionment with my work against anti-trafficking, because as much as I tried so hard and just saw so many colleagues around the world at so many different organizations trying so hard, it just felt like we were up against something that was impossible to make progress against, because it just was getting worse. And I felt very disillusioned and I felt discouraged. I almost, I considered, is this the time to quit? But I couldn't, because I just could never bring myself to do it. But I thought about it. Today, I feel a tremendous amount of hope that we can make enormous, and I don't want to say that in a way that sounds cliche, but just going through my own experience personally of seeing the way that so many people, just like you said, came together and put down our differences, put down our, backgrounds, our politics, our religion or lack of religion. I mean, I saw some of the most helpful allies in all of this were in the porn industry, were those who were actually porn performers. And I consider some MindGeek employees who their conscience was pricked and they came forward, and we've had dozens of hours of conversations, and I consider them friends. Like, we did this together, and journalists from left wing and right wing and politicians from, in Canada, it's like 8 parties came together to write a letter. And so I just have seen the beauty of when this happens, what we can do. And so I feel like this tremendous amount of hope and inspiration. The fight's not done yet, but just seeing how far we've come is, I don't feel like I did at those dark hours before dawn in 2020. I feel like a different person today, and it's good. It's so good.
And to the audience, like, it's not like, you have to understand how giant MindGeek and this corporation is. Not that they're MindGeek anymore. They're now, believe it or not, Ethical Capital Partners. That's literally, just so you guys understand, through the pressure that Laila and her lawyers and these attorneys and these victims have put on MindGeek, which we'll get into, but they were forced, they're now hiding, and they're running and hiding and changing their name and selling their this, and now they've renamed themselves Ethical Capital Partners, which is such a fucking joke. But anyway, I want people to know, like, because this was such a giant organization with so much ties to crime, it's not like Laila wasn't and still isn't in danger here.
It wasn't just me, and it was victims as well. And I detail that, what we were going through in the book. And that was a real part of the battle as well, was just facing the reality that myself and my family was, I have 2 small children, and I'm very real and vulnerable in the book about my struggle as a mother, wanting to protect my own family and my own children, at the same time knowing that this is a fight for all children out there, and that this is for my children's future as well. And I'm very transparent about the struggle of that. And we went through a lot of crazy stuff, and we still do. But having to move multiple times and having death threats and rape threats and, doxing, hacking, all of this stuff that was going on. And in addition to, like, a very aggressive online smear campaign initiated by Pornhub and his big PR company. And, in the book, I detail emails that journalists sent me from them to journalists saying all this crazy stuff, but trying to discredit and defame and because they couldn't fight it on the merits. Like, they couldn't just say, actually, no, this isn't happening. No, they couldn't, because it was, and it was true. And so the only thing they could do was to engage in this aggressive campaign to try to, smear, basically, not only me, but others in the movement and the movement itself. And so that was another part of this fight that was, like, very difficult to navigate. And I walk through that in the book as you see what happened.
I love this book so much, just so you know. Like, I absolutely, absolutely, absolutely love it. It's so good. Okay, so I want to get to some of the wins. So can you talk about some of the lawsuits that have come through this fight and how I fully believe you're winning. I really and truly do. But let's talk about that.
Yeah, of course. So there, throughout all of this, some amazing attorneys have stepped up to represent victims. And currently there are nearly 300 victims suing Pornhub. Suing the literal hell out of Pornhub in 25 lawsuits across the United States, Canada, and the UK. These include multiple class action lawsuits on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. And a few of those lawsuits, dozens of those lawsuits and victims are not only suing Pornhub and its owners by name, but they're also suing Visa and the hedge funds, Redwood Capital and Colbeck Capital, who funded the crime scene, who made it possible for MindGeek to be MindGeek today. And so Serena, who I mentioned previously, she is leading the charge in suing the hedge funds, the Visa individual owners, to hold all of these people accountable. So
I love that so much. It reminds me of the Backpage fight. If you remember that,
yes.
So Backpage was like my zero arrow target when I started this fight of like screaming from the rafters about Backpage. And just so people who may not be familiar with Backpage was like a Craigslist. It operated all over the world in multiple countries, and they sold washers, dryers, cars, and kids, literally for sale. And you could order up a kid like you could order up a pizza at any given time. And a kid would go missing, and you would literally see their ad in Backpage with their missing child poster and and people going, want to come and have sex with this kid right out there in the open. And this reminds me so much of that. And I remember it was Sheriff Tom Dart out of Chicago, thank you, my hometown, who led the charge to get, I believe it was Visa and MasterCard, and hold them accountable for allowing the transaction of buying kids to go through their credit card companies. So I love that something similar, or actually the exact same thing almost, has come through in this fight with Visa and Discovery.
And I hope to see what happened in Backpage. I mean, this is the dream that when you go to backpage.com today, there is a seal of the Department of Justice that says this site has been seized. And there is absolutely no reason why we should not be going to pornhub.com today and see that Department of Justice seal, the site has been seized. And I look at the fight against Backpage as, almost like a template, if you will, of what could be possible for holding this company and its owners accountable. And it's so important because if we don't end impunity for these corporate bad actors, we're never going to make a difference in stopping this. It's just the cost of doing business for them to, have a slap on the wrist, if you will. So we have to increase the risk. We have to decrease the profitability for these corporate traffickers to the point, because all of this truly at the end of the day is a risk benefit calculation for these executives and these companies that are enabling them. And if we don't make that risk too high, they'll just keep doing what they're doing. That's why we have to see criminal prosecution of not only the company, but its owners. We need to see the Department of Justice seal on that site. We need to see billions of dollars paid out in restitution to victims. Otherwise, we're not going to stop this.
No,
we'll have copycats, that will just say, look, the reward is better than the risk.
It's that simple. And I, to the layperson, you probably think the same thing I think, was like, what is taking so fucking long? But it's true. Like, how many more lawsuits, it's always shocking to me how long it takes. I mean, Backpage was gone after for a decade. Until
10 years, right?
Until finally this, stupid lawyer Liz McDougall screwed up in a Senate hearing and blurted out, we do know this is going on, and it's shocking to me that Pornhub is still continuing to allowed to continue and still have all of this illegal content on there. It's absurd to me. But thanks to you, Laila, I really, thanks to you, thanks to the victims, thanks to the lawyers and the whistleblowers and everyone who have gotten behind you, I do feel like we will see an end to this one day soon.
Yeah, we have to. We're so close. It feels like we can't give up now. Right. We've come so far. I mean, when we started this, it was an impossible task to even make a dent in this behemoth of abuse, I call it. And today, seeing how far we've come, we can't stop here. Now it's time to double down. Pornhub's on its knees. It's time to finish the job and finally bring justice to victims because it's important for their healing journey. They cannot have closure. They cannot have healing until they see justice served. For us to recognize what happened to you mattered enough that we will not give up until we see justice fully served on your behalf and on behalf of others who will, have their abuse prevented by ending impunity for these bad actors and not allowing them to just have the slap on the wrist and go on their merry way, business as usual. Not to say that what's happened has been a slap. I mean, they lost Visa, MasterCard, Discover. They can only have cryptocurrency and, bank wires as payment options on the site, which is the worst thing that could have ever happened to them. But we're not done yet. So we're going to keep going.
Yes, we are. To quote you, Pornhub is on its knees. We can't stop now. I love that. I want a t-shirt of that. Okay, where can everyone get the book, Takedown?
Anywhere books are sold. So, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, Amazon is an easy place to get it. But at your local bookstore, you can get it there. For international viewers or listeners, it's going to be released in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand in a couple of weeks. And it's also available in Canada currently. So you can get it there. It's on Audible. So for people who don't like to read and like to listen instead, you can. And I read the book myself. That was a challenging thing to do. I debated on whether I should do it or have a professional voice actor do it, but I felt I had advice that I should do it, and I'm glad that I did. It was hard to write it. It was hard to read it. Many tears. Many nights writing this story, remembering what has happened. Even much of it was written in real time as it was happening. But I'm just so glad that it's finally out there, that the truth has been put on the public record. I would say that this is probably the most comprehensive indictment of this company in existence yet, with regard to all of the detail, all of the information and the evidence against them for what has happened. So in that sense, it's important just to be on the public record. But at the same time, I hope this is an engaging story so that people can experience this journey with me and want to throw down their skills and join the fight too.
It's a phenomenal story. And you wrote it so wonderfully. You're engaged from page one. It's so good. It's so good. Anyway, Laila, thank you so much for being on. Please, audience, I'm telling you, this book is phenomenal. Please go and grab it. Takedown by Laila Mickelwait. It's phenomenal. You can follow Laila and the Justice Defense Fund on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. And what else can people do to join the fight?
Sure. I mean, I set up a team Takedown. So for people who read the book and they're inspired and they want to do more and they want to get further involved, there's some on-ramp there at justicedefensefund.org, or you could go to takedownbook.org and join Team Takedown. And what you do to join is you sign the petition, you read the book, write an honest review, and you can sign up to be a financial partner, even at like $10 a month. And we'll have an email list and we'll have action items, when there's letters to sign to Congress or members of Parliament, when there's letters that we need to send to Visa and MasterCard CEO to get them to adopt the preventative policies that are necessary. When things are happening, when things need to be shared, you'll get updates. It's called Team Takedown, and we're dedicated to continuing this fight and not only taking down Pornhub, although we will do that together, but also just taking down illegal content across the internet, because at the end of the day, the goal is to make the internet a safer place for generations to come. And that's what we want to see happen.
100%. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for listening to the Marisol Nichols Podcast, and please do not forget to click like and subscribe. And a big shout out to WD Hahn for our theme song, Something's Gotta Change. See you next time.